the machine that was never supposed to win. Its story began as a mistake, a project approved out of obligation, assigned to a small team with no budget, no influence, and no expectations. While the company funneled resources into flashy flagship models, this car was treated like an afterthought, a placeholder, a box to check, a machine destined for obscurity before it even existed. Yet today, it's remembered as one of the most unlikely success stories in automotive history. To understand how a forgotten project became a global sensation, we must return to the moment when a handful of engineers, overlooked, underestimated, and quietly frustrated, decided to turn a corporate neglect into an opportunity for rebellion. The assignment was simple: create an inexpensive entry-level model to satisfy regulatory requirements and fill a price gap. Executives didn't care about innovation. They wanted something cheap, something safe, something that wouldn't embarrass them on paper, but also something they didn't need to think about. No bold styling, no breakthrough engineering, just minimal compliance. But the engineers saw potential where leadership saw limitation. They recognized that for years, the company had neglected a massive audience: drivers who wanted reliability without pretension, practicality without compromise. While the industry chased luxury, power, and premium features, millions of people just needed a car that worked, a car that wouldn't fail, a car that wouldn't drain savings with maintenance costs and unnecessary systems. So the team embraced their exile from the spotlight. Without executive attention, they had freedom. Without expectations, they had room to experiment. Without pressure, they had clarity. They scavenged and used parts from other projects. They revisited older, proven engines that had long been ignored. They designed a chassis that emphasized durability over design flair. And slowly, the skeleton of a new machine took shape. Not flashy, not groundbreaking, but deeply, purposefully functional. But something else happened along the way. The team poured themselves into the project with a level of passion no one asked for. They refined tolerances. They redesigned mounting points to simplify maintenance. They optimized weight distribution. They engineered the car to withstand abuse from rough roads and long commutes. They tested it in harsh climates, not because they had to, but because they believed people deserved a car that wouldn't quit on them. What emerged was a machine built on quiet excellence. A car that didn't pretend to be something it wasn't. A car that existed for the people who've been overlooked for decades. When the first prototype rolled out of the workshop, even the engineers were surprised. It felt solid, confident, honest. It wasn't beautiful, but it was trustworthy, like a tool forged for real life, not marketing campaigns. But the company didn't notice. Not yet, because the machine that was never supposed to win was still invisible. But not for long. The breakthrough came during early field testing, an evaluation executives barely remembered approving. The prototype was sent to regions with harsh climates, rough infrastructure, and demanding daily use. It wasn't a glamorous assignment. No camera crews, no journalists, just real roads, real people, and a machine built to survive whatever the world threw at it. And survive it did. Test drivers reported something unusual. Nothing broke. Nothing rattled. Nothing overheated. The car handled potholes, uneven terrain, and long-distance routes with a steadiness that stunned even the engineers who built it. Fuel consumption was lower than projected, where on components was minimal. Mechanics inspecting the vehicle after thousands of miles found almost nothing to replace. The car was performing beyond expectations. Quietly, consistently, defiantly, word of its reliability spread among the testing teams. Not through official channels, but through whispers, shared stories, and late-night conversations in dusty garages. Engineers from other divisions stopped by the testing center just to see the machine everyone was talking about. They poked around its engine bay, crawled beneath the chassis, studied its suspension geometry. They found nothing exotic, just smart decisions, thoughtful engineering, and a design that valued resilience over spectacle. Still, executives showed little interest. They were preoccupied with flagship vehicles, marketing projections, and the race to adopt emerging technologies. The entry-level project remained a footnote in their strategy presentations. But something unexpected happened when the car reached consumer focus groups. People loved it, not because it was stylish, not because it was powerful, but because it felt honest, solid, dependable, in a market overflowing with overcomplicated systems and fragile premium features. This machine felt refreshing. It reminded people of cars from an earlier era, cars that simply worked. Families appreciated its low running costs. Commuters praised its comfort. First-time buyers liked its simplicity. Rural drivers admired its toughness. Every demographic found something to value. The quiet project was beginning to make noise. When executives finally reviewed the early feedback reports, they were stunned. The numbers didn't just show approval. They showed genuine enthusiasm. Consumers trusted the car more than models that cost twice as much. Marketing teams scrambled to understand how a machine designed with almost no branding strategy had developed such strong emotional resonance. But as praise grew, concerns surfaced. Some executives feared the car would cannibalize sales from higher-margin models. Others worried it lacked the visual appeal needed for a successful launch campaign. A few suggested delaying production to add premium elements, unaware that doing so would undermine the very qualities people loved. Inside the engineering team, frustration simmered. They had built something rare, a car defined by purpose, not pretense, and now faced the possibility of watching it be reshaped into another over-designed product chasing trends it didn't need. Meanwhile, the car's testing continued, revealing even more strengths. It performed reliably in heat waves, snowstorms, monsoons, and long-distance endurance trials. Drivers described a sense of confidence behind the wheel, a feeling that the car wouldn't betray them, no matter conditions. That confidence became the heart of the machine's identity. But the growing pressure from corporate leaders threatened to smother the project just as it began to bloom. The executives wanted the car to fit into their existing view of success. The engineers wanted it to redefine success. A collision was inevitable, and as the launch date approached, the company stood at a crossroads, unable to recognize that the machine they'd ignored was about to become their greatest triumph. The collision arrived when the car entered its final internal review, the stage where executives, marketers, economists, and safety teams gathered to evaluate whether the machine was ready for production. What they expected was a routine assessment of an entry-level model. What they encountered was a quiet revolution. The engineers presented durability data that eclipsed every comparable vehicle in the company's lineup. Charts showed component longevity far exceeding projections. Maintenance costs were dramatically lower than industry averages. Warranty claims, based on stress simulations, were predicted to be minimal. The room murmured with confusion. This wasn't supposed to be possible, not from a low-budget project built with leftover resources. Executives reacted in two very different ways. Some saw opportunity, others saw a threat. If the car succeeded, it could revive the brand's reputation. It could reach markets the company had ignored for years. It could build loyalty in regions where reliability mattered more than luxury. But it could also expose flaws in the company's premium strategy. It could undermine the pricing of higher-end models. It could shift the brand's identity in a direction leadership wasn't prepared for. As the meeting dragged on, the room fractured. Marketers argued the design was too plain. Stylists insisted it needed visual upgrades. Chrome accents, larger wheels, unnecessary technologies that would spike production costs. Finance officers demanded price increases to maximize profit margins. Each suggestion eroded the qualities that made the car exceptional. The engineering team pushed back with uncharacteristic force. They explained that added weight would reduce efficiency. Cosmetic upgrades would undermine affordability. Complex electronics would threaten reliability. Every demand from leadership chipped away at the machine's purpose, and the engineers refused to let it be rewritten for the sake of appearances. But resistance came at a cost. Executives began questioning the team's lack of flexibility. Some hinted at replacing the lead engineer. Others suggested delaying the launch until a more suitable market position could be identified. The project that had once thrived in obscurity was now trapped in political crossfire. Tension reached a breaking point during a high-level demonstration arranged for international dealers. The goal was simple: prove the car's real-world value. But leadership insisted on showcasing a slightly modified version, one with heavier trim pieces and cosmetic changes added to satisfy certain markets. The engineers reluctantly agreed, knowing the additions compromised performance, but hoping the core strengths would still shine. The test day unfolded under heavy clouds. Dealers and company executives stood at the track's edge as the car began its run. At first, it performed well. Acceleration was modest but smooth. Handling remained composed. But as the course grew harsher, the added weight revealed its consequences. The suspension struggled. Fuel efficiency dipped. Stress points in the upgraded components began to show early wear. It wasn't a failure, but it wasn't the miracle the unmodified prototype had been. Executives misinterpreted the results. Some pointed to the car's limits as evidence that the project had been overrated. Others argued for postponement or redesign. The dealers, sensing hesitation from leadership, shared muted feedback. The myth of the machine began to fade before it even had the chance to reach the public. Inside the workshop, despair settled over the engineering team. They watched their creation, simple, resilient, extraordinary, being reshaped into something ordinary by the very people responsible for launching it. Yet despite the growing uncertainty, something deeper was unfolding. The regions where the car had been tested continued sending unsolicited reports. Letters from rural drivers praising its toughness. Messages from commuting families thanking the engineers for a car they felt they could trust. Independent mechanics marveling at its simplicity. Demand wasn't coming from dealerships or corporate boardrooms. It was growing from the ground up. People wanted the original machine, not the modified one, not the corporate-approved version, the real one. And as those messages piled up, the engineers realized something powerful. This car didn't need corporate validation to succeed. It needed to reach the people it was built for. The conflict between corporate ambition and practical excellence was about to reach its peak, and the decision that followed would determine whether the machine remained a forgotten miracle or became the unlikely champion the world didn't yet know it needed. The final decision unfolded during a stormy evening meeting, where frustration hung in the air like static. Executives demanded yet another redesign. More features, more styling upgrades, more profit potential. They wanted a car that fit the market they understood, not the one waiting to be discovered. But the engineering team had reached its limit. Quiet loyalty gave way to open defiance. The lead engineer stood before the board and made a declaration no one expected. Produce the original version without unnecessary changes, or he and his team would walk away. Gasps echoed across the table. Executives accused him of insubordination. Some threatened disciplinary action. But the lead engineer didn't flinch. He laid out the truth plainly. The original machine worked. It exceeded expectations. It solved real problems for real people. Every corporate modification weakened it. Every added feature pushed it further from its purpose. If the company wanted a car that would sell itself through trust, durability, and honesty, they already had it. If they wanted a profit-driven imitation, they could build it without him. Silence filled the room. When the engineers left that night, they didn't know what decision awaited them. Some feared termination. Others packed their belongings. But deep down, they felt something they hadn't in months: clarity. They had defended the soul of their creation. What they didn't know was that the board had already begun reevaluating their position. Market data showed a shift in consumer behavior toward practicality. Competitors were struggling to deliver reliability. Reports from testing regions revealed overwhelming enthusiasm. The dealers who had seen the modified version sent follow-up messages asking to test the original. The truth was unavoidable. The company needed this car more than the car needed corporate approval. And so, the decision arrived the next morning. The board approved production of the original version, without cosmetic upgrades, without unnecessary features, without the compromises that had nearly destroyed it. The machine would be built exactly as the engineers intended. Simple, durable, affordable, and honest. When the announcement reached the workshop, cheers erupted. Some wept, others embraced. A project born from neglect had finally earned its place. Production began cautiously. Marketing teams struggled at first, unsure how to promote a car defined by substance rather than spectacle. But they didn't have to. The public did it for them. Reviews praised its reliability. Drivers shared stories of long commutes, rugged trails, and harsh weather conquered without issue. Mechanics celebrated its accessibility. Word of mouth exploded. Sales surged, quietly at first, then overwhelmingly. The machine became a symbol of trust in an industry drowning in complexity. It found homes in cities, towns, farms, and remote regions. It served families, workers, students, and travelers. It outlasted models twice its price. It forged a reputation not through marketing budgets or flashy reveals, but through resilience. The car that was never supposed to win became the company's greatest victory. Its success reshaped internal priorities. Executives learned to respect engineering judgment. Designers embraced simplicity. New models were developed with the same philosophy: purpose over prestige. The brand regained credibility not through innovation, but through humility. The machine's legacy endures even now. It reminds us that greatness doesn't always emerge from ambition. Sometimes it grows quietly in forgotten corners, built by people who care more about function than fame. And for the engineers who fought for it, the moment the first production model rolled off the line was a quiet, personal triumph. Proof that sometimes the world doesn't need another masterpiece. Sometimes it needs a car that simply refuses to quit. Subscribe to join the journey.